All right, how's everybody doing? What we have here is a Konica FC-1. This is a camera I purchased a few years ago, back when I decided that I was going to be the online evangelist for this brand of cameras and lenses, which had been well, frankly, forgotten and could be procured very cheaply on the secondhand market. Good quality stuff for the most part. Well, anyway, the reason I bought it was because at the time I owned two auto-reflex cameras, the T2 and the TC, which I liked and I still do, but they use the mercury battery, a problem which is compounded in the Konicas, the auto-reflexes, because they use two batteries, so the voltage differential is doubled, and the effect on the light meter likewise. So my auto reflexes tend to be about 1.5 to 2 stops off minimum. Well, about 1.5 to 2 stops off. And you can adjust that somewhat with the ISO setting, but once you get to about 2 stops, that's kind of I just wasn't using light meters all that much on those two cameras. But I liked my Konicas, and I wanted, especially the lenses, and I wanted a Konica with a reliable light meter. So I found this online, and they're kind of rare. The FC-1, they didn't make a whole lot of these. I'll describe it. We'll go through the history in a moment. And it comes with it has a gallium photo cell, kind of like the Nikon FM uses gallium photo cells as well. So it's more reliable, better quality photo cell than the cadmium sulfide, the CDS cells used in the 60s and early 70s. And it also was made to run on 1.5 volt alkaline batteries. So I thought, well, okay, great. Let's found one online for $35 and listed in excellent condition from a major retailer, which I have purchased from many times in the past. And so I bought it and got it, and I was pleased to see that it was in beautifully preserved cosmetic condition. And well, then I put some batteries in it, and it turns out the light meter on this thing is not 1, not 2, but 3 stops off. 3 stops off. And I was livid. I was absolutely beside myself. The only reason I bought the doggone thing was for the light meter, and listed in excellent condition. I'm like, oh, man, I was furious, but what do I expect? For a $35 item, do you really expect the retailer to check the light meter? Well, I guess it was not reasonable for me to expect that to have happened. Anyway, which is why I'm not going to tell you who the retailer was. So I got this thing, and it's just not, there's not a whole lot to recommend it. It's all plastic, not a whole lot of metal on it, and it's has your standard shutter speed interface. The dial goes from forwards backwards because it's purely electronic. This battery is a brick without. This camera is a brick without a battery. So you got that from 2 seconds to 1/1000th. Then you have one of these soft touch shutter release buttons, which had become fairly popular at the time. And your ASA dial is here. There is no exposure compensation function. There is no exposure hold function. There's no depth of field preview. There's no mirror lockup. So this is a consumer grade camera, and it was well, let's see where it fit into the Konica line. Let's take a little detour for a bit of history lesson. So 1979, here we go. 1979, Konica introduces the FS-1. And the FS-1 is the very first 35mm SLR with an integrated motorized film advance system. So it's got it's got a large hand grip right around here, and which this camera does not have, but it's got a large hand grip here where you put in, it's either AA or AAA batteries, I forget, and that powers the camera and the motor drive. Same year, the Auto Reflex T4 was discontinued. That was the last of the top of the line professional line Auto Reflex cameras. It had only been introduced the year prior. The fact that it only lasted a year was not a good sign for Konica. And replacing it with the FS-1, that was kind of a gimmick. I mean, they put a lot of money into advertising back then, full page ads in all the major magazines. Look at our new bells and whistles. You know, this thing has an integrated motor drive, and it did sell. It sold. You know, they sold a lot of those things, but well, not enough. The following year, 1980, this camera, the FC-1, is introduced, and the FC-1 is essentially the FS-1 without the motor drive. It's the FS-1 minus the motor drive, which relies on the traditional manual advance lever like so. Otherwise, it's identical to the FS-1. Now, I preferred the FC-1 because my understanding at the time was that the FS-1 had reliability problems, but those were largely confined to the film advance mechanism. I just assumed that the FC-1 would be relatively gremlin-free, and I was wrong. Then, around 1981, I think, the FP-1 was introduced, which was basically an FC-1 minus manual shutter speeds. So it had, you could automatically, well, it was basically just program mode only, essentially, as far as I can tell. Or maybe it was just, yeah, program mode only, I think. So, not a whole lot of those were made, as far I think. Then in 1982, the Auto Reflex TC, the very last of the Auto Reflex cameras, was discontinued. 1983, the FT1 replaces the FS1. And from what I can tell, the FT1 largely remedied many of the electronic problems of the FS1, but too little too late. It didn't sell very well. And I remember the magazine ads for the FT1 being like monochrome quarter-page ads, whereas when the FS1 came out, they were like full spread, you know, two-page, you know, color ads, and it was the ship was sinking by that point. And this was not enough to save it. 1985, the TCX by Konica is introduced. It's a 35mm SLR with the Konica AR mount, manufactured by Konica and marketed by Konica. And this is the last Konica AR mount SLR to be introduced. And 2 years later, Konica ceases all production of all SLRs. I think they kept producing some point and shoots, but SLR production ceased in 1987. So that's this is the tale of the decline and fall of Konica as a 35mm SLR manufacturer, and this is part of that story. Another thing that really, well, just irks me about this camera is, check this out. This is just, if somebody can think of a justification for this, any engineers in the crowd, let me know, because this just doesn't make any doggone sense to me. Why? Why do they do this? Here's the battery compartment, okay? Now, I told you it uses alkaline batteries. That's true. It uses LR44s. Well, that's easy, right? Everybody uses LR44s. Well, not like this. You pull out this thing, which is the battery carrier, and then open it up, and you insert 4 LR44 batteries into the battery carrier. And then you close it back up, put it back in. You got the red spot here, you got the red spot here. Match those two together and put it back in the camera like so. Why? Why would you do that? At the time this camera was introduced, the most popular, best-selling consumer SLR series was the Canon A series. That is the AE1, the AE1 program, the A1, all those. And they used a battery, which was essentially 4 stacked LR44 batteries. I can't remember the nomenclature of that particular battery, but they were widely available. It was not a proprietary Canon battery. It was just an ordinary battery made by all the battery companies. And it's 4 LR44s stacked one on top of the other, essentially, but in one unit, as opposed to this stupid battery carrier gizmo that this camera has. So why? No, I don't know. So anybody knows what? Anybody has a clue? Sure. Yeah, I welcome your guesses, which were probably more educated than mine. One cool thing about the camera that I do like is the film loading system. So in my opinion, Konica did the best quick loading, easy loading systems for their 35mm SLRs. You just lay the film across the back here. You don't have to insert it anywhere. You literally just put it in, pull it across, close it, and advance. And that's it. That's all there is to it. It's that easy. The auto reflex cameras had a slightly different system, but nonetheless, I believe superior. I think that's one thing the Konica cameras did better than anybody else, was their quick loading, auto loading systems. Featured in this camera, the FS1, the auto reflex series. Canon had their quick loading system. Praktica had its proprietary loading system. I think, my personal opinion, Konica's was the best. This camera I've used. It does work, sort of. I've put 2 rolls of film through it. On the second roll of film, it stopped responding at frame 30 or 31. Push the button, nothing happens. And I wasn't sure what was going on, so I took it home, swapped out the batteries, and voila, it came back to life. And I just went outside and took 5 or 6 pictures of flowers, just to kill the roll because I was so aggravated. But I suspect this thing has a short in the system because it's draining batteries. When you look through the viewfinder, it's got a row of LEDs on the left-hand side which illuminate next to the indicated aperture value. And they're very dim in this particular model. I don't know if they're dim in FC-1s in general, but in this particular model, they're very dim. They wash out in sunlight. Very hard to see. But I suspect that may be a symptom of the electronics in this thing, which it's probably on death's door. This camera might have a few more rolls of film left in it, but light mirror's off by 3 stops. It ate up the batteries in 30 exposures on a roll of film, and it's pretty much a museum piece at this point, as far as I can tell. So that's the story of me and my FC-1, and I hope you found this useful or informative or amusing, entertaining, or any of the above. That's what I got for you today. Take care. See you in the next one. Bye-bye now.